Good afternoon. Welcome to all to this webinar that Center for Global Languages, Bengaluru City University has organized. This is a part of a series of webinars that we have planned for this month. And today we are starting with the webinar on the Japanese language. And we are very happy to present before you this webinar. I hope you will all like this webinar, enjoy it, share it, and also look at the opportunities that you will get through this webinars. So there are a series of webinars that we have planned in different languages. So today we start now with the Japanese language webinar. And I would like to invite Mr. Abhishek, who is also faculty of Japanese at Center for Global Languages, who will be animating the webinar, and also the other speakers who are with us today. And they will be enlightening you about various possibilities, the opportunities of learning the Japanese language. So welcome once more to all of you. And over to you, Mr. Abhishek.
Thank you, Dr. Jyoti Venkatesh. Thank you all the Vice Chancellor and the Registrar and all the other panelists. And most importantly, thanks to all the viewers who have joined this webinar and are keen to learn about Japanese language and its possibilities in the land of rising sun, that is Japan. So just a brief introduction about myself. My name is Abhishek, and I'm a faculty member at the Bangalore City University. I have been teaching there for the past 4 years, since 2017. Overall, I have been teaching Japanese for the past 16 years. I have done my graduation in Japanese language from Jawaharlal Nehru University back in 2001. And apart from that, I have also been certified by the Ministry of External Affairs of India and Japan of government to teach Japanese in India. So that's the introduction about. And I also thank the panelists who have joined us and who will be definitely speaking on this. So we have Sudha-san, who is also a faculty member at the Bangalore City University. Anjana-san, who is a member of BNK, that is a Japan Teacher Association, which is there. Apart from that, she's also the member of Indo-Japan Chambers. And we have Krishna, who also has been a former faculty member for the Bangalore City University. And finally, we have Nikhil Ravi Kumar, who will also be speaking, and he has a background in animation and gaming and is currently based in Chennai. He has runs an anime club, and of course, he has a company which sells anime merchandise as well. So thank you all, and most importantly, thanks to Dr. Jyoti Venkatesh, who has given me an opportunity to speak on this occasion. Thank you. So let's begin with the session today. And I will be sharing my screen. I hope my screen is visible to all.
Yes.
Okay. So welcome all to this webinar. It's organized by the Center for Foreign Languages, Center for Global Languages, Bangalore City University, and we try to promote the Japanese language and other foreign languages. So let's begin with what we know about Japan. You know, when we think about Japan, what are those images which come to us, right? So let's look at a few images which we as perhaps Indians or know about Japan. The first thing which comes to our mind is samurai. Now, samurais is in ancient Japan, they were kind of warriors who used to serve the old feudal kings or lords. So we have all grown up, at least from my generation, have grown up watching samurai movies. So that's something which is ingrained in my memories of watching those movies. I'm sure many of you do so. Bonsai, another one which comes to our mind when we think about Japan. Bonsai is a technology through which large trees are grown into miniature variations, and bonsai is one of those variations which many of us have grown. In fact, I do have one bonsai in my house, and I try my best to keep it alive. Mount Fuji. So when you talk about Japan, there will definitely be a mention of Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is the tallest mountain in Japan, and it's very much revered in Japan, just the way we talk about Mount Kailash in India, the same way the importance of Mount Fuji is for Japanese. And you would definitely see in many of souvenirs, if you're bringing from Japan, that the image of Mount Fuji is there. Mount Fuji is a dormant volcano, and therefore you can see on the top of the volcano, it's a flat one. Again, talking about Japan, the images which come to our mind is one of the thing is the kimono. Kimono is the traditional dress of Japan, just the way we have saris in India. And it is nowadays worn on special occasions during graduation ceremonies or any worship point, and in temples, of course. Sushi, when it comes to Japanese cuisine, we talk about sushi, which is a combination of fish and sometimes rice as well. There are nowadays a lot of restaurants which are serving sushi, even in India and especially in Bangalore. And I would really, recommend people to try out sushi in one of the restaurants if you are a non-vegetarian, of course. Another image is of anime. So this is another trend which has grown up over a period of time. There are the young generation, they are very much interested in animations and anime and manga. Manga is something of comic books, which we call in India, but not exactly that. So a lot of people, young generation, they are definitely interested in anime. But there is more to Japan. And today we're going to see what else in terms of opportunities we have, apart from the cultural things we know about Japan. So these are the facts, some facts from economic facts about Japan and the land of rising sun, that it is the third largest economy in the world. Now look at the size of Japan and then think it is still the third largest economy in the world. The first largest economy in the world is United States, followed by China, and third comes Japan with 5.6 trillion USD dollars of economy. That's a huge amount. Another fact, third largest automobile manufacturing nation. So when we talk about automobile, we have to talk about Japan. And you can look around you, you will find most of the cars which are there on the roads in India or elsewhere. Definitely you will find majority of them are from some Japan manufacturing company, be it Toyota, be it Honda. And if you are looking at Nissan Renault, you have the Nissan, which is also there. So third largest automobile manufacturing after China, US, it comes Japan. World's largest, fourth biggest importer and exporter in the world. So the first is US, followed by China, third Germany, and fourth is Japan with $625 billion of import and export business annually. World largest credit nation. So this is a nation which gives the largest number of loans to other countries, especially developing countries. And the best example, if in case you have been on Bangalore Metro or Namma Metro as we call it, on the most of the station, you will find that there is a board which says, credit or loan offered by the Japan banks. Its service sector contributes 68% to the economy. 30% is industry, 1% is agriculture, which means it's one of the biggest importer in the world. And it has the very high per capita income. Its per capita income stands at $40,000, which is approximately US dollars, which is approximately 30 lakhs if I have to convert it in Indian rupees. So this talks about how big is the industry in Japan, how big it is a nation. And, as a nation has such a huge market, such a developed nation, there are bound to be opportunities which will be there in such a country. So now let's look at a few more figures. Now, these are the top Japanese companies which are there in India. I'm sure all of us would have either heard or seen these companies somewhere. Mitsubishi is another company which is in manufacturing. It does have a presence in India, but not as big as many other companies. Sony, we all have heard of since our childhood. LCD, TV, you talk about headphones. That's the Sony, which is the top companies. Nikon, another camera company. We have heard, and now it's an expert in DSLR cameras. Suzuki, car. We have so many variants on Suzuki running on Indian roads. Fujitsu is a company which is nowadays in Bangalore, especially on consulting. Entity is another company, which is again one of the big major companies in Japan, and is now slowly making its presence felt in India. And it's again in consulting and services. Hitachi, we have heard about. Hitachi is in manufacturing, and it's a very popular company as well. Nissan, another automobile company, which is running on Indian roads. You will see many other brands which are running Nissan. Toshiba is one of the biggest company which is in the LCD screens in the world. It may not have that big presence, but it is the biggest LCD manufacturer in the world. So Toyota has a major presence, especially in Karnataka as well. We have industries outside Bangalore, which has a Toyota manufacturing industry. Toyota Kirloskar, we call it over here because it's in a joint venture. Panasonic is another company, which is again in the LCD manufacturing. Yamaha is one of the other companies which was earlier back during the 90s in the racing segment of bikes. And again, slowly it has again started making its presence felt in India. And it is known for its specialization in racing bikes. SoftBank is a company which is again making its presence felt in India. Sharp is another manufacturing, especially in the field of televisions. And of course, we have heard about Honda, another major Japanese automobile manufacturer. So these are the companies, when you look around yourself, you will definitely find. So a nation which is so small, but has such a huge presence in terms of its companies in India and across the world. Right, a few things again, as I mentioned, largest automobile manufacturer in the world is Renault Nissan. This is a joint venture. And this company is the largest automobile manufacturer. When you talk about the second largest automobile manufacturer, that too is a Japanese company, Toyota. And we're talking about the world right now. And third largest automobile manufacturing nation after China and US. So many companies would have moved in terms of manufacturing to China in terms of cost effectiveness, but still Japan is on rank 3 in terms of automobile manufacturing. Now, talking about the demand, major investor in Indian automobile sector. So just to guess how much its presence is in India, 61% of Indian market in terms of car belongs to Japan-India joint ventures. 51% is owned by Maruti Suzuki and 5% each by Toyota and Honda. 20% of third biggest FD investor in India with $200 billion of USD investment in India. 20% out of that is captured by Japan in FDI as an automobile industry. And since it has a large presence in automobile industry, it has also a large presence in components of automobile industry. That is, it has a major investment in auto component parts. And these things create a high direct and indirect employment in automobile sector. So you have a direct employment where they are hiring people. You have indirect where there are other subsidiaries which are working with them. Could be a transport, could be other items from where they are buying their components. And skilled is definitely required at all levels in automobile sector. So basically what I'm trying to say is, if you have such a huge investment, if you have such a huge presence, there is going to be bound to be requirement of skills which are related to your automobile skills plus Japanese, because that is going to let you move forward. Okay. Now let's look at a few other things, what's happening around. Now we talked about the might of Japan. So just to give a might of Japan, after the Second World War, Japan went through a major economic boom, especially in the manufacturing industry. Now this boom created a generation of Japanese who are very well off, in the sense that they have good health, they have a connection to resources, and the poverty levels are very less. And that what it did is, which it happens in usually in developed nations, it reduces your death rates and increases your lifespan. Because you, when a country is developed, you will have a better medical infrastructure. Now, over a period of time, with the reduction in death rates and improvement in lifespans, 1/3 of Japan population is today more than 65 years of age. And Japan is known as the oldest society currently. Now, with a particular such a huge 33% of population moving to 65 categories and above, which means there is currently an impending labor crisis. Now, in order to mitigate this labor crisis, and by 2030, 6.5 million, that is more 10% of the workforce in Japan is currently going to retire. And there are going to be 163 vacancies for every 100 job seekers. That's the reverse in India, if you look at this. And major shortage which are anticipated are already happening are in retail, information technology, healthcare, and constructions. So due to this kind of labor crisis, Japan is now opening its shores to foreign workers in Japan. And that brings us opportunities, which are we going to talk about. So when you talk about information technology, we talk about US, we talk about Europe. But over a period of time, since information technology boom in India from 2000 onwards, the market has slowly been saturated. most of the processes from US, or when we talk about Europe, they have been migrated either to India, or Indian companies, Infosys and other, are already providing services. So this market is already saturated. Japan is the second largest IT market after US. But this potential is untapped due to language constraints and cultural differences. So right now, Japan government is estimating a shortfall of 8 lakh IT engineers by 2030. And they do have a immediate current requirement of 2 lakh IT engineers in the next 2 years. And it's not that Indian companies have not anticipated it. They are already currently working with other Japanese company and trying to get into joint ventures with Japanese company. And TCS, Infosys, these are the prominent Indian companies who are already in joint ventures with other Japanese company and trying to make their presence felt in the Japanese market. And as I mentioned, there are these two companies, Fujitsu Entity Data, which are major companies in Japan. They have already set up their base in Bengaluru, and they are also actively looking at IT engineers and then training them in Japanese language. And these companies, in fact, Fujitsu Entity Data have their Japanese, they look actively for Japanese IT engineers who know IT skills as well as Japanese language, and combining them and then setting them across to Japanese client. Sometimes they work from India, but most of the time, these are overseas opportunities where they are required to be stationed in Japan. Hitachi, Panasonic, and Toshiba are also setting up research and development centers in India to recruit engineers. TCS, Wipro, Infosys, HCL, Patani are also competing to grab the untapped market share, which we just discussed one slide back. All right. So now what we know is there is a demand in information technology. Now, what are those skills in demand? The top IT skills in demand are mobile application engineering, data science, especially big data, cybersecurity, cloud computing, mobile application engineering, web development, server engineering, anime, and games. Now, these are the top IT skills demand currently in Japan. But since Japan is a non-English speaking country, if you learn Japanese and along with these IT skills, that is going to give you a shortcut to an potentially huge untapped Japanese market. IT infrastructures related project management, artificial intelligence, language in demand, if you are into IT languages, Python, Java, Ruby, and C++. All right, so we did talk about the demand in information technology, which is one of the demands. Now, few slides back, we talked about the impending labor crisis in Japan, which is happening because 33% of 1/3 of Japan population is already beyond the age of 65. So what is happening around is social spending by the Japan government is high. People are old and they need nurse caring. So the demand for nurses and daycare personals for aged is again high in demand. And the Japan government has already estimated that they will be short of 2.7 lakh nurses by 2025. Now, what the Japan government is currently doing is they are actively having special recruitment programs in Northeast India and other parts of India to recruit nurses. But again, as one of the major things is that Japanese language requirement is there. So there are these nursing colleges and the nursing universities, they are collaborating with the Japanese schools, Japanese language expert, and making these nurses, giving training for 1 year or 6 months on the Japanese language and culture, and preparing them for serving in Japan. Now, talking about a few notable investment in India, we have Bangalore, Delhi, Calcutta, Mumbai, Ahmedabad Metro. So Japan International Cooperation Agency, it has an investment of 3,000 crores in our Bengaluru Metro. 3,000 crores, that's a huge amount. Mumbai, Ahmedabad bullet train, we have hearing so much is news, is again one of the major projects which is currently being funded by Japan. Japan has major investment in Chennai and Visakhapatnam ports. We have a few dedicated freight corridors, DFC called DFC projects, which are again coming up in India. And this is also being funded by Japan. Coming to our own city, the BWSSB Phase 2 Kaveri has a major loan from Japan. Back in North India, Yamuna Action Plan Project Phase 2, again, there is a major investment by the government, Japan loan disbursing agencies. Right. So these were the, we talked about the investment. So we talked about first the power of Japan, followed by what are the challenges are there, and then how, which are the sectors in which they have opportunities. And in order to have those opportunities, which are those major skills which you require, right? In terms of your IT skills or perhaps nursing. Now, we talked about nursing skills, we talked about IT skills, but the major criteria which still remains is learning Japanese language. So how do you learn that? Now, you have many institutes where you can learn Japanese language. In Bangalore, we have Bangalore City University. I will be talking about that as well in one of the other slides. So once you learn the language to a certain extent, the Japan government in association with Japan Foundation, which is a part of their agency which promotes Japanese language, conducts exams known as Japanese Language Proficiency Test across India in several centers. Now they have levels. The L5 is called basic, L4 is elementary, L3 is intermediate, L2 is pre-advanced, and L1 is advanced. So these are the levels. So once you learn your Japanese language from different centers in Bangalore, you can learn from Bangalore City University, you can appear for these exams at different centers which are held across India. In Japan, in Bangalore, it is usually conducted at the Christ College. So you can appear for that exam and get this particular certificate. Now let's talk a little more about this certificate. So this test checks your Japanese language proficiency and certifies you. And this is meant for the non-native speakers, that is people who are not Japanese. This test is conducted by the Japan Foundation and Japan Educational Exchange and Services, which is a part of the Japan government. Test is conducted twice a year, once in July and again in December. Usually the first Sunday of July and December. The very good thing about is, unlike your other exams, maybe the CA exams, it doesn't have an expiry date. So once you have the certificate, you have the certificate. You don't have to renew it again and again. It's a lifelong. And anyone can appear for this test. No minimum qualifications. If you are a school student, you can still apply. If you are a retired person, you can still apply for this exam, sit in this exam. You are a university student, you can sit in this exam. And you can appear for any of the tests conducted during the year. And all main cities, as I mentioned, have a test center. And best thing is, you need not be a part of any institute to appear for this exam. Any private individual who has learned Japanese through perhaps YouTube videos or anything else on his own can also appear for this examination. And many Japanese companies do rely on the score of this testing for hiring. So you go with your IT skills, you go with your nursing skills and other skills, you appear for a company interview. They will ask you, all right, apart from which institute have you learned Japanese from? And they will definitely ask, in case it's not a university or any other places, do you have a JLPT license with you? And what is used? Now, usually N5 to N1 is there. In order to get hired by a company, at least minimum of N3 is desirable. The test is objective. You need to gray out the correct option with a pencil. So it's not written. You need to have those grayed out with pencil options, which you also see in many joint entrance exam held across India. It evaluates you on 3 parameters: comprehension, reading, listening, and grammar. So this is the grading for Japanese language. I have mentioned only N5. Why? Because N5 is the starting base. So you have the language knowledge, 25 minutes, grammar, 50 minutes, and listening, 30 minutes. In total, you will have 105 minutes of examination. That is 1 hour, 45 minutes. The marks are also mentioned. Usually for grammar and language vocabulary, you have 0 to 120. Minimum sectional pass marks are 38. And how much vocabulary you need, how many listening is required, and grammar is mentioned also there. All right, so coming to another important point, when you talk about Japanese, there is a perception. And the perception is, this looks to be a difficult language. But in actual, it is not. And if you are an Indian, it's definitely not a difficult language to pick up. And let's look why it is not difficult to pick up. Now, Indian languages and Japanese have same grammatical structure called SOV. S stands for subject, O stands for object, and V stands for verb. So subject comes first, followed by the object, and at last the verb. Now, English grammar structure is SVO, where subject comes first, followed by the verb, and at last the object. Now, let me illustrate this with an example. Now, very simple. Ram eats food. So Ram is the subject. In English, it comes in the front. The verb is in the middle, which is to eat. And the object, which he's going, the subject is eating, is at the end, which is the food. In Indian languages, and I have given examples for 2 languages. One is a state language, Kannada, and Hindi. So Ram khana khata hai or Ram uta tintare. So Ram will come first, followed by the objectors, which is uta or khana in Hindi, and verb at the end, khata hai or tintare. In Japanese, it's exactly the same. And if you look at your screen right now, the placement of subject, the placement of object, and the placement of verb in Indian languages and Japanese is the same. Now, apart from this, let's talk about few scholarships which you may be interested in. So once you start language Japanese, there are scholarships which are also provided by the government of Japan in association with the government of India. There are few long-term scholarships, 1-year scholarships, there are few 3-year scholarships, and there are a small duration scholarships called MEC scholarships, which usually people who have been learning Japanese from recognized institutes such as Bengaluru University, Delhi University, or Jawaharlal Nehru will be eligible for. Apart from that, there's something called Technical Internship Program. This is again a collaboration between the government of Japan and government of India under the program Skill India, where there are institutes which are teaching you technical skills plus Japanese language. And then there are other organizations in Japan that once you learn it, they will interview you. And if you clear that interview, they will bring you into Japan, and there you will be contributing for a specific period of 3 to 5 years in their society. And that will help you to develop your skills. And when those 3 to 5 years are over, you can again come down to India, or you have an option to stay there in India and look for other jobs. Now let's talk about Bangalore University. What are the courses available in our own Bengaluru City University? We have a Certificate 1 in Japanese language, that is a starting course for 4 months. Certificate 2 in Japanese language, which is again for 4 months. Diploma in Japanese language, which is for 8 months. Higher diploma in Japanese language, again, which is for 8 months. And advanced diploma in Japanese language, again for 8 months. And apart from that, we do have also a master's program in Japanese language. These courses are offered at the Bengaluru City University. And for more information, you can reach out to Bangalore University, Center for Global Languages, City University, PK Block, Palace Road, Bangalore. And it's very 5 minutes walk from Sir Vishwariya Central College Metro Station. Right, so that was all from my side. On the next, we have a few panelist members who will be talking about, we have invited a few panelist members, and we will be talking to one. And just give me a second before I move to the panels. So on the panel, we have first Krishna-san. Krishna-san is a former faculty member from Bangalore City University. Welcome, Krishna-san. I will be stopping sharing my screen and you can take over. Krishna-san, are you there? I don't see you online. Okay.
He's not here, I think, Abhishek-san.
He's not there. Okay. So we can move to the next panel member. I think we have Nikhil-san on there. Hello, Nikhil-san. Welcome to this webinar. Thanks for joining and taking out a few precious moments from your busy day. I hope you can just help us with a few words. All yours. So Nikhil-san, are you there?
Maybe we move to the next panelist and the others will join in soon.
Yep. Okay, we have Anjana-san from BNK. Anjana-san, welcome to the webinar. I would appreciate if you can speak a few words.
Yes. So thank you very much, Abhishek-san. Thank you, Dr. Jyoti Venkatesh, Bangalore University, for providing me this opportunity to introduce about Bangalore Nihongo Kyoshikai. To say something brief about myself, I have been with Indo-Japan Chamber of Commerce for past 12 years, and of course BNK, and part of core committee Japan Haba. Now I am holding a position of vice president at Bangalore Nihongo Kyoshikai. So Abhishek-san, it was well presented, lot of information for the students to think about Japan opportunities. So you have also mentioned about JLPT, what is JLPT, everything. So I will just jump to this Bangalore Nihongo Kyoshikai. It was, it started in 2006 by Satoshi Hata Sensei and few other Japanese and Indian teachers at Bangalore University. With the increase of interest in Japanese language, they felt the need to bring all the institutes and individuals involved in teaching and learning the Japanese language under one roof to make a common platform for learning and interacting in Japanese. So, yeah, this was started in 2006. The objectives and the aim and objectives were very similar: to increase the interest of Japanese language learning among the students and the teachers, to facilitate the interaction, where communication is the main key thing for any foreign language, since we cannot do it often, so there should be a forum to exchange views and communication. Okay, so it is between the language and it's between the teachers and the students. And to promote the Japanese language education, culture awareness, this was a must. And to provide the access and to books and the materials for learning and teaching Japanese, which is maintained with BNK's library. The main activities of BNK is to conduct JLPT exam in Bangalore. It started in 2007. Okay, so it was earlier conducted once in a year, but later, with now we taking on this committee, it is being conducted twice in a year. It is July and December. So the other exams are being the Kanji Kente, that is the Kanji aptitude test. And there are many study groups and seminars for teachers and student members, and Japanese language educational activities. There are many courses as well. Okay, so the July JLPT, I told you, it started in 2007. So it's a Herculean task to conduct JLPT. I think you are all a part of the volunteer team. Thank you very much. I have seen Sudha-san, Krishna-san, everybody are part of BNK, Abhishek-san. So thanks for your all support. So planning, preparation, organizing, and conducting of JLPT exam has, always been a very good Herculean task. So, but it's been made possible with the cooperation of Indians and Japanese together, volunteering as proctors, control room staffs, and audio staffs. Okay, so BNK applications have been online from 2018 onwards. Till then, it was conducted in Christ College, but now the applicants have increased, and we have moved to a bigger venue, that is St. Joseph's High School in the mid of the Bangalore city. In 2019 December, we had 2350 applicants. So we had to increase one more venue next to our SJBHS venue. So apart from JLPT, BNK is very actively involved with conducting language workshops. This is with support, of course, with the Japan Foundation. We work together, and then the teachers training program, and then there are many cultural sessions that is been happening, to give a cultural awareness to the student members as well as the teachers. So they are the tea ceremony, origami, and there was a movie show for a week, and then the haiku, that is called a poetry in Japanese, and then the speech contest, and of course BNK is a part of Japan Haba, and there was a Japanese business pitch contest where the business ideas is expressed in Japanese. So then that was evaluated, and of course the winners were also awarded awarded for that. And then the buddy programs, that is one Japanese and one Indian would get together, go out, have dinner, lunch, go out, visit temples and things like that. This is a kind of interaction program, getting to know each other. And many story sessions, kanji learning and teaching methodologies, which was done by native Japanese and business Japanese as well. So many activities are conducted at BNK. So these are some of the photos that depicts the programs what I was mentioning a while ago. Marugoto is a book introduced by Japan Foundation. So the attendees are here, and it was quite interesting. So these are the very recent photographs. This what you are seeing is the tea ceremony. It was conducted by Yoshitaka-san, and here Shamala Sensei, she is the teacher for Ikebana, flower decoration, and as what I told, a buddy program interacting with Japanese and Indian nationals together. They go out, and the other one is the movie show conducted at Consulate General of Japan in Bengaluru. So these, there are many activities, and quite often we at BNK take time to, it's a series of meetings that we hold to see what is best for the learners and teachers, and accordingly we frame the events and programs. So, but yeah, once you join any Japanese course, you can get into BNK. You can become a student member. If you are a teacher, then you can become a teacher member. So as what Abhishek San told, anybody with no age bar are welcome to BNK. So I would stop here, and anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. This is with this quote, I would want to end this today's session. The contact details are here. We are in Kormangla. You can visit us. The email, Facebook details are here to be noted. So thank you very much again, Dr. Jyoti San, for giving me this opportunity. Abhishek San for coordinating this. Thank you so much. Look forward to BNK. So this is one more fast learning curve apart from your Japanese learning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anjana-san, for that, wonderful introduction to BNK. And I hope people who are learning Japanese are also making use of the library options which are available with the help of BNK, and get more interested about Japanese. And thanks for conducting so many cultural events to make people interested in learning Japanese language.
Thank you so much.
All right. So next on the panel, we have Nikhil Ravikumar. Nikhil Ravikumar is based out of Chennai, and he runs an anime club. And he will be talking about the opportunities which are there available in the field of animation and gaming. Over to you, Nikhil. Thank you. Hi, Nikhil. I can see you sharing your screen, but I think your voice is not there. You may want to check your mic. Yeah, okay. Yeah, now you are audible. Thank you. Konnichiwa.
Thank you, Abhishek-san, for inviting me. So I work with a company called Pop Circuit. We bring anime merchandise to India from Japan. And we work closely with community-run organizations like the Chennai Anime Club and the Bangalore Anime Club for advancing Japanese culture and language studies in Chennai and Bangalore and all over India. So what we do in the anime clubs is, for Japanese study, we actually started with just a few of us who were writing the JLPT together. And then we realized it's fun to just send each other information about Japanese. So we started a WhatsApp group. And then slowly we moved to Discord, which is a very convenient platform for voice calls. And so we have these sessions regularly, practice sessions, where we just try to converse with each other. So it's a very casual space. Anybody can come in and start learning no matter what level they're at. And it's not really an alternative to joining a proper organization like BNK. It's something that goes along with it. So you take a course, and then usually you learn in the course, but you don't have a space to practice your Japanese or learn about the culture. So that the anime clubs do a really good job of this. They give you a space to go and talk to people in Japanese, improve your conversational skills, and in general learn about the culture in Japan. So PopSocket is doing an event in August called Switch Fest. We will be bringing together anime fans from all over India, and we'll be conducting events that have to do with anime as well as Japanese. There'll be a Japanese workshop given by a Japanese person. We did something similar in Bangalore with Anjana-san with the Bangalore Anime Club and Chennai Anime Club for Japan Haba. So we're hoping to replicate something to at least 1% of that. In terms of opportunities available, in general, it seems that when we're working with companies in Japan, knowing Japanese seems to be the #1 requirement. Even if your other skills are not exactly meant for that job, if your Japanese is good, you get slotted in and slowly learn on the job. So it's definitely worthwhile to learn the language if you're looking for any kind of operational experience. So if you are interested in practicing Japanese, head over to the Bangalore Anime Club or the Chennai Anime Club and say hi to them. And yeah, just get started practicing.
Thank you, Nikhil-san. So Nikhil-san, just a few things. So how do you foresee the anime industry, and how big is the anime industry, and how much benefits we can have when we combine anime as well as Japanese together?
Right, that's a great question. So first, in terms of scale, India has one of the largest populations of young people in the world upcoming. So as we go into the next decade, we will have the world's largest population of young people. And so there'll be a surge in demand for such things, such as animation, entertainment, and so on. And it also serves as a very convenient way to learn the language and the culture, because when we learn from other sources, it's a little more difficult to relate. But when you learn it through a story, which is what anime is, learning both manga and anime, we're listening to stories. So we can learn one thing at a time and easily digest all of that. So in fact, like I suddenly have all of this knowledge of Japanese culture just through watching a lot of anime. Right? So yeah, I think watching anime is a convenient way to learn Japanese. It's not good to just learn from one source, just from anime or just from manga or just from movies. But when you combine them all, it becomes really good, and you get to learn a lot more than you otherwise would. And the most important thing, I think, is interacting with other people, trying to speak to other Indians and Japanese people who speak and learn the culture from them. In fact, my own studies have been intermittent in that I learn a lot when I speak to somebody, and then when I'm alone, it kind of goes down. And so I try to involve myself with other people who are as interested as me in these things. And when you share that experience with them, your rate of learning goes up quite a bit.
Wonderful. So thank you, Nikhil-san. Thank you for those important insights in the field of animation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Next, we have Sudha-san. Sudha-san is also a faculty member for Bengaluru City University. So Sudha-san, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek-san. So I will just answer a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A here. What's the difference between JLPT and NAT? Right. So, and there's another one called JLCT. So that is Japanese Language Capability Test. Now, the main difference is that who conducts them. JLPT is conducted by Japan Foundation and JEES, which are part of Ministry of External Affairs, Government of Japan. So it is a government agency that's conducting JLPT, whereas JLCT and NAT are conducted by private players. So that's the first, that's the major difference between the two. If you're studying for JLPT, you can appear for NAT or for JLCT because the guidelines are more or less the same. The pattern, the question pattern, the, as Abhishek-san had said that they test you on comprehension, reading, listening, grammar. So that pattern remains the same. And JLPT themselves, after 2009, they have revised their testing system, and now they don't really have a set fixed number of syllabus. There's no fixed syllabus. There is only a loosely defined guideline, and the guideline is more on the competency. That is, at N5 level, you should be able to have a very basic conversation. You should have, you should be able to go to a shop and, engage. You can buy something, go to a restaurant, order food. So it's more based on competency than on understanding, than on just learning vocabulary, number so much, or kanji number so much. So JLCT and NAT, the advantages of that over JLPT are that they are conducted more number of times in the year. So JLCT and NAT are conducted almost every second month. So you get to do them 6 times the year. But NAT and JLCT are not conducted all over India. They are conducted in fewer centers. So NAT, for example, I know is conducted in Pune. It is conducted in the Delhi NCR region and at Chennai. Whereas JLCT is, I think, conducted in Bangalore also, along with these centers. So you will have to actually check with the check online. I'm sure you'll get information about the exams and their schedules, but the only advantage is that they are held a number of times, whereas as both Abhishek San and Anjana San had mentioned, JLPT is conducted only twice a year. So you have to wait 6 months. And since the pandemic last July, JLPT hasn't been conducted for three times in a row. So people are still waiting for it to be conducted. That is one thing. And another thing is that there are certain companies who would prefer a JLPT score over a JLCT or a NAT score. So many people do this way also, that the N5 and the N4 levels, because as Abhishek San had mentioned, for employment opportunities, N3 is the, it's the minimum qualification, or most desirable qualification is N3. So what many people do is that they give the preliminary N5 and the N4 levels with JLCT or with NAT, and then they just give the JLPT exam with N3. The N3, they give it with JLPT. So that the last, and it's always the last score, the last level score that are taken into consideration whenever you're applying for any kind of job opportunity. So I hope I have answered the question and the differences between JLCT, NAT, and JLPT. Yes. Over to you, Jyoti ma'am or Abhishek San, if there is anything else to be shared.
Abhishek?
No, nothing from my side. So Jyoti ma'am, it's all yours.
So first of all, I would like to thank Abhishek, Sudha, Anjana, and Mr. Nikhil for having conducted this webinar. I am sure a lot of information and has been given, and a lot of clarity also has been provided for so many people who would be definitely wanting to know, the possibilities, the availability of learning, for going through the courses, the exams, the scholarships, and the whole package basically. So first of all, so thank you very much. You all did a great job, and I'm sure it is going to benefit a lot of students. From, of course, Bengaluru City University side, from Center for Global Languages, what I would like to mention is the courses are going to be announced soon at the department. So those who want to join the course may definitely contact us. The details have been provided, and we will again provide it at the end of this session. And we are also on the process of offering these courses through the online mode also. When I mean online mode is, you can follow the courses online, but of course, the evaluation, examination, all will be offline. So that is the next move from our side. And we would like to offer these courses to the maximum number of people so that they may utilize their skills and skill themselves for the future and become global citizens. Thank you very much, one and all. And I wish to inform also that we are having a series of webinars lined up for you from Center for Global Languages side. And you can follow us on the social media page at CGLBCU. And do log in and follow these webinars. These will be webinars for different languages. We have one shortly coming up at 3:30 for Italian language. Thank you, Abhishek, Sudha, Anjana, and Mr. Nikhil, and all the best to everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Jyoti
you,
Venkatesh,
Doctor.
thank you
Jyoti.
everybody else on the panelist for taking out time and being a part. Thank you to all the attendees who have taken their, time on a Saturday and, have been a part of this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you,
nice day.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.